following along, if you have that, you may have it on a smart device or something, or a dumb device, or whatever you want to call it, something like that, or you just listen. I'll be reading it all anyways, so if you I add to it, obviously, because otherwise what point would we have to get together? I could just give you the book and say, here you go, right? So I'm always adding. That's why it takes so long to get through one lecture. One lecture usually takes us 3 to 6 weeks to get through. So they are supposed to be 3 credit hour lectures. So they're supposed to be 3-hour lectures. So it is supposed to take 3 weeks. Hey, close that door. It is closed. I need to put another door right there. They're not in there. They're in that room. They're in the other room. Need to put some weather stripping around it, and need to airtight or airproof or whatever you call that. Make the room soundproof. The room, yeah, airproof it too. No, maybe not. What's that? Noise proof. That's right. They have these anti-sound boards at where's that? They had them at the Habitat for Humanity Restore. They were like, I want to say like $25 a board or something, which is really cheap because they're like 100 and something usually. But you put those up along the wall in there, and it literally like grabs the sound out of the air. Like the sound just stops right there. Wouldn't want them in here because, we need the sound in here. But like in the nursery, in the classroom, just line the walls and the ceiling and the floor and all the furniture. Baby cries, and it's like, exactly. I get some of those for everybody's house too. So, yeah. And your car. Now that's the best thing. If you put it in the back seat of the car, kids going crazy, you can't even hear them. Yeah. I don't think it really works that way, but anyways, we thought about getting a trailer, just, carry the kids in. All right. Anyways, we're going to get into our study here. All of that was on live stream there. We're talking about the existence of God. Continuing here, this is our second session, or it's our fourth session on the Landmarks of Baptist Doctrine, Theology Proper. It's our second session on this this particular lecture. So lecture 2, part 2. I should really label all of these online by lecture, but we're doing good to have what we have now. So praise the Lord. So we're here on letter D, under point 1, the existence of God established by reason. So we're talking about reason concerning the existence of God. And so far, last week we dealt with the argument from universal belief, the argument from cause and effect, the argument from design. Now we're looking at the argument from life. And so he says here, man cannot make life. This is true. Man can only, we'll just read what he says, and then I'll elaborate. So he says, he may observe DNA, he may produce an in vitro fertilization, he may engineer the genes, he may clone, but he cannot create life. Life must therefore come from outside of man or nature. And the only source of life is God. The only source for all life is God. As we found, whenever scientists like to say, "Oh, we created life." No, you didn't. Just because you can clone something, just because you can copy something, doesn't mean you created it. It's kind of like, you find a good song in the songbook, and you're like, or somebody else's songbook, right? And you're like, I want to sing this song at church, so I'm going to copy it. And you put it on the copier, and you copy it, and then you bring it up there, and you say, hey, look at this song I wrote. No, you just copied it. Somebody else produced it. You just made a copy. In fact, you didn't even make the copy. The machine did. And so, when man says, oh, created life. We've successfully cloned a human being, or we've successfully cloned, I don't think they've done that yet, but we've successfully cloned a sheep or a goat or something like that, right? And they're like, woo, we created life. No, you didn't. You just copied it. All you did was you put it on that copier, and maybe it didn't work quite that easily, but you made a copy. I mean, hey, congratulations. You did a good job making a copy, but you didn't create life. Yes, sir.
Oh,
I thought you were.
What people don't realize is when you use the word creation, you mean productive. What's the ex nihilo?
I'm not sure.
I just know
but yeah, creation means that you had no materials to start with. Not only did you make what you make, 'cause, you know, we talk about, oh, you know, I made the bulletins. No, I didn't. I used words that already existed, letters that already existed, toner that already existed, paper that already existed, a printer that already existed, a computer and all the software that already existed. I didn't do any of that. All I did was use the stuff and let's see, how would you, what's that? I intelligently designed it with materials already available. You see, that's different. See, I used how God made us in his likeness, you know, to design things. That's what he did, right? He designed everything. And then we use the rules of design, you know, or the rules of his creation that he's made, and the brain that he's given us that's got some similar ideas, and then we make stuff, right? I guess in some sense, we talk about creating things, you know, like you get you get some clay and you create something out of it, right? You make, I don't know, a bowl or a little figurine or something. They say you create or whatever, you're creating something, but in all reality, the clay is already there. You're just molding the clay into something that it wasn't before. So that's really all that we do when we do genetic engineering or cloning or building. You know, talking about, oh, I made this building. No, you didn't. God did. God made all the materials. You just fashioned them together to put it, you know, to make it something organized. Although it was organized already. You think about wood, man, there's all these different things that we can look at that he doesn't necessarily point out all of these things, but all the things in creation. I mean, I stand here every service, stand behind this huge, massive tank structure of wood, and this huge coffin thing here, and I always, we always do. We often look past the intricacy, and we just look at the common. You know, y'all are sitting in pews. We got so much wood in here; it's crazy. Y'all sitting in wooden pews. I'm standing behind a wooden pulpit. There's a wooden piano. But when we look at it, that's not really wood. It's like fiberboard with a laminate over top. So looks like wood though. But we see, we even try to mimic the little intricacies. When you look at this wood, can't really see it real well on this because it's really, really finished. But when we look at this wood on your pews, on the altar thing here, the pulpit, often we just look at the wood and we see, oh, there's a box made of wood, right? Big box with some neat little trim work and this and that and whatever. We don't think about the fact that we think about the design of the box. We don't think about the design of the wood, the individual cells that make up all of the grains and all of the, and what the wood went through to get where it is. Not just the drying out and the cutting and the shaping and the trim work and not all of that, and the nailing and the fashioning. We don't think about all of that. We think about all that. We don't think about the part where, you think about the design in the wood itself, the grain. It's pretty neat. Yeah, we may have some little bit to do with that, and you can actually control what a tree does to a certain extent, when you're raising the tree. But the guy that built the pulpit probably had nothing to do with the tree. Somebody else dealt with the tree, and then, so anyways, we think about God's creation and all of the intricacies that go into it. And I look out there on the pews, and of course, as I get back past Brother Adams, past Brother Jeff, the third pew from the back just looks like a piece of wood to me. But the one in front of it, I can see all the grain all the way up here. It's really neat. It's like you got this interesting grain pattern going through all the pews. And I can actually, on that side, the lighting is so that I can see the last pew, the grain in it. And I can kind of vaguely see the last pew there. It's just the second to last that you can't really see from here. But you get the idea, right? There's this, and then you have to think about the fact that what you're sitting in at one point was alive. I don't mean alive like it was moving like the other creatures, but trees breathe, right? They breathe in that carbon dioxide and put out the oxygen, and they grow, and they've got, there's the reproduction, and there's, all the things, when we define life, we recognize that there's life in vegetation as well. So anyways, it's interesting how God puts all this stuff together, and then he causes it all to live. And it lives in such a way that causes all of these little intricate patterns in the wood. Some of it has to do with the way they cut it. But without the pattern already there, based on the life that particular tree lived, in this case, oak. Man, you think about how long does it take for an oak tree to grow big enough to make one pew out of? Oak trees grow slow, very, very slow. You plant a maple tree or a pine tree, and they're like, shoo! I got a maple tree in my front yard. It was this tall 2 years ago. Now it's as tall as my house. Yeah, it's only about that big around, but we got one in the backyard. I pulled it out of the flower bed because I was like, oh man, the tree growing in the flower bed. But it came out root and all, and I was like, whoa, maybe I should save this, put it somewhere. So I had a hole in the backyard in the ground where I tried to plant our old Christmas tree to see if it would grow, because it wouldn't die. I had it on the mount in the backyard, and it was just on the little, the little circle thing that you have the tree in. It sat out in the backyard until May or June, still alive, still green as ever. I stuck it in the ground, and it died a week later. I was like, whatever. Should have just left it on the thing. No roots growing or anything. It's just still alive. I wasn't watering it or anything. It's one of those, the base wasn't like a base that has the water in it. It was like a metal base that goes around and it screws into the back of it. Anyways, so had the hole, stuck the little tree that I pulled out of the garden or the flower bed, stuck it in the hole, threw some dirt in there, walked away. That tree's bigger than my house now. It's not huge. I mean, it's almost big enough that the kids can climb on it. And it was, what was that, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. But those trees grow really fast. But because they grow so fast, there's a lot of factors that make them weak. And so when you're building a pew, something hard, you want to use something that grows slow and takes a long time. Because why? Because those fibers are closer together, they're stronger. It's just the way that God made that tree. Crazy. Anybody sit there in the pew and think about, I wonder what this tree looked like when it was growing? No, it's just, pastor's just weird. He thinks about all that stuff. He's preaching along and he's like, I wonder what that tree looked like. Okay. So argument from life. We can't create that. And we can plant a seed that God already made. We can pull that, what we thought was a weed out of the ground, right? Because those maple trees, right, those little helicopter things, they go everywhere. And if you're not careful, they'll be growing in your gutters. I've seen them grow in people's chimneys. There's a tree. There's a courthouse somewhere in Indiana. Can't remember which county, but there's a county courthouse that has, I think it's Greenfield, has a tree growing out of it, like out of the one of the, it just is growing out of the top of the, and I think they've like decided to like let it happen. I'm like, it's going to destroy the building eventually, or part of the building, because the roots are going down, and it's, anyways. We can plant the seed. We can move a plant that's kind of naturally, as God made it to do so, has already hit the ground, went into the dirt. The seed dies, it germinates, up comes a little sprout, and then you have a tree growing all of a sudden. Or like those trees, I'd love to have like a mulberry bush where I want it to be, and then you get the mulberries and stuff, right? But where mulberry bushes grow? They always grow along the fence or right up against the house. You're like, why does this happen? Well, there's a really logical explanation, but it's a little gross. Well, the birds eat the mulberries, and then they go stand on the fence, and they plant seeds. We'll just leave it at that. You can use your imagination there. Why do they get so close to the house? They stand on the gutter, and they plant seeds. Or they fly by your car, and they try to plant a seed in your windshield or your hood or whatever. So that's the way it works, right? But it's amazing. Yeah, then you got to wash it off, right? And then it gets washed off, and it goes somewhere, and it grows. And they're like, how did this get here? Why is there a mulberry tree in the middle of the car wash? Anyways, no, it's the design that God made, and we can't actually fully explain how the life takes place. There's these arguments about whether a child is a child at conception or after a certain amount of development or whatever. A doctor friend of mine posted something on Facebook about they've been able to when they do the in vitro, or not the in vitro, but the test tube fertilization, they were able to actually video on a microscopic level what happens when an egg's fertilized, and there's a flash that takes place. It's pretty amazing. And anyway, so we don't know what in the world they try to explain it, and they'll say, oh, it's a flash of certain some certain vitamin or something that flashes, whatever it's. Well, maybe, but somewhere along there, life happened. How? We don't know. Well, we do know. God. God put it there, right? He made that possible. There's the thing that we don't fully understand how the seed germination thing works. I mean, we kind of do. It's amazing. For thousands of years, we've studied this stuff, right? Ever since Adam left the Garden of Eden, he's been sticking stuff in the ground and trying to figure out how it works. It's like, let's put this in the ground, and here it comes. Okay, and try to find a way to have that come out and not all the weeds come out. We had a garden this last year, and I'm like, I tilled it up 4 times and try to make sure that there's no weeds growing or anything like that. Sure enough, what's that? Well, I mean, we tilled it, and I let the chickens run in it and eat whatever was worms and bugs and and weed stuff, all that stuff. Tilled it up 4 times, and nothing was growing in it, nothing at all. At the point that I planted the seeds, actually, my wife planted the seeds. So she plants all the seeds. I think she just went out there and put weeds in the ground. No, I'm just kidding. So she plants all the seeds. And then we're watching for it to grow, and all kinds of stuff starts popping up. Not just the plants that we planted. But we start seeing like this weird like network viney type thing with these succulent leaves on them that start growing up. And I'm like, what is that? So I start looking, on online, looking at these pictures of these different things, and I talk about like a succulent weed or this or that, and I find the picture. I don't remember the name of it, but sure enough, it's an edible plant that's growing although it is a weed, but it's an edible weed, I don't know if anybody's ever studied foraging or things like that, but there's actually books written on eating weeds. And that's not like eating, like not talking about, you eat the, it tells you what part you're supposed to eat. We'll just put it that way. It's not like, you get a rose bush, right? You're like, oh, roses, they have thorns. Oh, I can eat those stems. No, but you can eat the rose hips and they have vitamin C, like amazing amount of vitamin C. Y'all know what that is? Anybody ever have like rose hip tea or anything like that? Okay. That's actually the little bulbs after all the petals have come off. You just chop those off and you let them dry out, and then you chop them up and make tea. And it's got vitamin C. Anyways, it's amazing how God makes all this stuff, and He puts all the stuff. We talk about the trees and the herbs and the vegetation and all that. How He made it for us. In fact, my wife was pointing out that she was reading in Genesis the other day, and she saw that God made the herb of the field, and the fruit of the fruit, vegetables, all that stuff, made it for us to be meat for us. And we always think meat means like animal flesh, right? But the flesh of these other things, it's meat for us, right? I don't know if anybody's ever had, you ever had pine tea? Pine tea? You can take pine needles off of a pine tree and you can put it in water, hot water, and steep it that way. And then you take all the pine needles out and you drink the tea. It has more vitamin C than orange juice. Yeah, amazing. It tastes like, you're drinking Pine Sol, but you put a little bit of honey in it. It's not so bad. It's like sweet Pine Sol. And so you can also make it with, anyways, whole lot of, there's also pine nut, the little pine nuts that come off of the pine cone. Yeah, those are edible. Isn't it amazing? All the stuff that's edible that God put out there, and we're all like, it's not, no, I'll have my potato chips and and I'll have my, whatever this, whatever we had over those Krispy Kreme donuts. And I'll have my, yeah, amen. But God's got a lot of stuff, right, that we can eat, and then there's some stuff that if we die. But it's amazing the life that God has put in our planet, the life that He's, that this is, again, I know we're not spending a lot of time in the Scripture here on these things. These are matters of reason that we look at the creation and we say, this is what God's done. And it is an argument for the existence of God because we cannot reproduce it. All we can do is jump into the actual, jump into the design, jump into the system, and maybe manipulate it a little bit. But we can't reproduce the life that He's made. All we can do is just jump in and be a part of it. That's all. And it's an amazing thing. So the next thing here is argument from being. This is sometimes referred to as the ontological argument for the existence of God, having to do with the being. It says man's intuition of God, regardless of race, culture, religion, or geographic location, is invariably that of an infinite, perfect being. Why? He says, how could a finite and imperfect man devise such a concept? This must argue for the existence of such a being, for man by himself would not have devised it. Why would man, who is, as we are, sinful, imperfect, and we have an end, we can look at our beginning, we can look at our end. We see it every day. Babies born, people die. We drive by cemeteries all the time. There's the end of man. We see it over and over. We drive by 6 or 8 cemeteries yesterday. We see it, right? We see the beginning of it. We drive down the road, not just man, but all the other creatures, right? We drive down the road. We see deer standing in the field. And we're like, look at that, beautiful dozens of deer out there. Did I say in the road? I meant in the field. We see them out there in the field. We're like, wow, look at that. Or we're driving down the highway and there's a deer laying on the side of the road. Well, that didn't make it, right? We're used to seeing the end of things. We're used to seeing the beginning of things, right? We'll see little baby, whatever, we'll see every day, we see eggs, I don't know if you guys see eggs every day, but we see eggs every day. And we often forget that that's actually like half of the beginning of something. And in some cases, since we have a rooster, it's actually the beginning of something. We just got it before it became something. Well, before it was already something. It's just not a developed something yet. So we're eating, chicken, except on the early side. So, yes, sir. Well, we as a finite being living in a world that's filled with finite things, right? Finite meaning has a beginning, has an end. Okay. At least from our perception, right? We recognize that we have no end really. We live forever, but we do have a beginning. So it still makes us finite. Infinite would be no beginning, no end. So anyway, we see a beginning and an end of all creation. Why is it, or how is it that man, that some finite imperfect being would come up with some idea of an infinite perfect being? We wouldn't. What's that? It's just wouldn't happen. It's what God put in us when he created us, to recognize his existence. Again, I know we kind of talked about argument from being from a different perspective earlier in the study, but this again, it is not likely that a finite being living in a finite world with all kinds of finite things would somehow create. That's what they say. Oh, man thought he needed God, so he created him. If we were going to create a God, he would have a beginning and an end, because he would be like us. That's all we would have to work with. But because we didn't create God and he created us, we recognize that he's different, that he's superior, he's infinite and perfect. Yes, sir? Finite, F-I-N-I-T-E. Did I spell that right? All right. Infinite, it just put I-N at the beginning. Finite, that's man. No. Finite means you have a beginning, have an end. You have one or the other. It's kind of hard to have an end without a beginning, but it is like the opposite of infinite. It's not exactly the opposite. Because like with man, we are beings made by God who are finite beings. In other words, we have a beginning, but we're beings that God made that don't have an end. We have a physical end, but ultimately we don't. Our being does not end. It's just the physical aspect. Is that? Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So finite. The finite reality of man actually is further than just having an end and a beginning. It's having bounds, having limitations. Yes, sir.
You were talking about no matter how many times you kill that garden, you still got weeds. Genesis.
Yeah.
Chapter 3.
Yep.
The last part of 17 and all of 18. And sorrow shalt thou eat of it. No, take that back. And it shall be cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it the days of thy life. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee.
That's right.
Thou shalt eat the herb of the field.
Yeah.
You can't have the herb of the field without the thorns and the thistles.
That's right.
And that's the sweat of the brow, because you have to tend to it.
Yep, that's right. Well, yeah, the weeds, really, my illustration was more just that there's life, even life that we don't like, the weeds. But the thorns and thistles, in some cases, though, not the thorns and the thistles, but what we would consider weeds are actually, in some cases, God intended on it being food. We just don't like it. Like we all cry about dandelions, right? We're like, oh, dandelions, nasty dandelions. Oh. Yeah. Well, you just tell people, if people come by your house and they're like, man, your yard's filled with dandelions. That's nasty. So no. That's my dandelion garden. You leave it alone. That's edible food right there. You know, you can eat dandelions. You can do fried dandelions. You can have dandelion tea. There's dandelion. The leafy stuff that's you can make salad. You can put that in your salad. I mean, hey, if you can't beat them, eat them. Amen. So, anyways, you can also make dyes and things like that with that yellow stuff. That's why our bulletins always have the yellow streaks on them, because we got dandelions in our printer. So, argument from being. Again, you guys get the point there. Argument from morality. I want to finish this before we get out of time here. We've got through letter H that I want to get through, and we might even touch on number 2 here, the existence of God developed by revelation, or we might save that for next week. We'll see. So, argument from morality. This is sometimes referred to as the anthropological argument for the existence of God. This argument says that because man is a mental, moral, and emotional being, his cause could be no less. The question of universal morality, remember Romans chapter 2, verse 15 talks about that, or mentions, we'll look there, finds an answer to this argument. So Romans 2:15. He says, he's talking about the Gentiles and stuff, and then he says, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts, the meanwhile, accusing or else excusing one another. We can look at a lot of other passages that point out the fact that God's placed within us an innate understanding of right and wrong in terms of the law, and not just a matter of, you know, we ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and so now we know right and wrong. But further than that, we have within us, within our being, we have an understanding of certain things that are, we recognize that there is a God, just from who we are, how God made us, and we recognize and even those who say, oh, there's not a God, because if there was a God, I would have to, what would they say? We have to answer to him. In other words, there's some moral responsibility to God if there is a God. Why would we? And then why would we dismiss God from his creation? Because we don't want to answer to him, because we don't want to recognize the moral obligation we have to him. On the other side of that, most reasonable human beings have a understanding of a moral obligation that they have to others. It's not okay for me to do something to you that I wouldn't want you to do to me. Right? I think it's kind of crazy that God would even have to tell us that. But because we're selfish beings, he did. But isn't it interesting, though, that a kid that will have no problem taking a toy from another kid so that they can play with it has a problem with that other kid coming and taking the toy from him. Why? Why? It's because man's selfish, right? Human beings are selfish. I can take from you, but you can't take from me. Oh, wait a minute. Why is it okay for one and not the other? Oh, because then it affects me, right? Is that? Because it's mine. Yeah. Right. So we recognize it's one of the first words kids learn, right? Mine, right? Like those birds on Finding Nemo, they're like, mine. It's mine. Belongs to me. I want it. And by the way, they do that even when it's not theirs. I'm raising 4 kids. I know what it's like. Like, that's mine. I always tell them, nope, that's dad's. And then my youngest, always reminds me, no, it belongs to God. And I say, yes, it belongs to God. And God has given Dad the authority to make sure that it's used properly. And so it's not yours. So no, that you have this concept of possession, right? Why did we throw off the British government? Because the British government thought, oh, colonies, mine, right? Oh, you make money, mine. Oh, you got land, the fruit of that land, mine. Taxation, mine, 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 right? And why is it that we got so mad about no representation? Because that's the whole point of the taxation, is so that we can be represented on a national level, or in that case, an empire level, or whatever. That's the point of paying taxes and toll and things, is so that we can have some representation in our area. Like what's going to happen with, the whole idea of taxation is to protect the people, right? You use the tax funds to fund, pork barrel projects and things like that. No, you use the tax funds to protect the people from enemies, foreign and domestic, from potholes. Amen. You know what though? That's actually a community responsibility. But when you pay the tax to have it done and it doesn't get done, well, now you've got what's wrong now? I gave for something to get done, and instead of something getting done, the money's being used for something else. And so what do? We fire the representatives or the mayor, and we get another one that will better represent the desires, so to speak, of the taxpayers, within the realm of common law. Common law being the basic understanding of the last or the second table of the law, and that is, you can't take from me, you can't kill me, you can't hurt me without repercussions. And I cannot do the same, or the same applies to me. I can't kill you, I can't hurt you, I can't steal from you, I can't lie about you without repercussions. Right? And that's because it's just not right. And God made us with that within us without even having to open his word and show it. It's written in our hearts. That makes sense? And so having that without having quote unquote, this is the thing, like you got these foolish wise people, right? The people who think they're so smart. They say, oh, no, it's our society that taught us that. And no, it's your society that taught you the other way. It's your society that's trying to teach you against God because your society is trying to rebel against God. But they'll say, oh, it's your society that taught you, you were brought up a Christian and all this. And I love when people say that, because I say, no, I wasn't. I was brought up a drug dealer. And so I say, no, I wasn't brought up a Christian. My parents didn't teach me this stuff when I was a kid. God showed me, so anyway, so that, that you've got this, and you say, well, what about the societies that don't, that we call savage, right? That have we think they have no regard for property and life and all that. But in all reality, we go look at, if we were to go and study and look at these quote unquote savages, what do they fight over? Property. You took my property. That's my territory. I'm going to fight you for it now because you took what belonged to me. What is that? It's the law written in their hearts. It's not okay for you to take what belongs to me. Or then you get some that say, I just want to expand what belongs to me, and so I'm going to take yours. And then what happens? Because they understand that it's not right for these people to take their stuff, they fight back. That's where you have all these tribal wars and stuff, whether it's India, Africa, or Australia, or wherever it is. Not to say that there are tribal wars in all those places, but you have all of these things happening. Why? Because man was created with an understanding of personal property, of some particular inalienable rights. And then we have people marching in by the however many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or whatever, trying to get our inalienable rights alienated. That's a whole other speech for another day. Argument from congruity. It says if the key fits the lock, we have the right key. If the theory fits the facts, in all probability, we have the right theory. For much time, no one had ever seen an electron. Yet the electrical and electronics industries of the world operate successfully on the theory that electrons exist. Yeah. I'll tell you what, they don't feel good if they try to make a path through your body. So we were playing with some of that stuff yesterday and Thursday, and the Thursday before that, we were messing around with wires that carry electrons around. We just have a healthy understanding that it just needs to be running through the wires and not me, right? Sorry, congruity, yes. So he says here, belief in a self-existent personal God is in harmony with all the facts in any aspect of, or any aspect and phenomena. When man removes God from the equation, confusion and chaos will always result. It becomes like trying to repair an automotive using a field guide for bird watching. Anybody ever do that? Like, well, I need to change the ball joint on this big van. Been there. I need to change this ball joint, or I need to change the gas tank, or I need to change, this or that or whatever. And hold on, let me go get the manual. And we open up a bird watching manual. Okay, let's see. This one here, it whistles like this. It's like, okay, why doesn't that work? The wrong manual, right? Trying to come up with some other explanation of how things are the way that they are, other than God, is like pulling out the wrong manual and saying, "Oh, let's see, how's this work?" Right? And pull out your evolutionist book and you read it and you say, "Huh, well, that seems to." Well, no, it doesn't really make sense. On the surface, maybe it did for a moment, but when I step back and I think about it logically, and I think, okay, that still doesn't answer the question of where it came from. All it does is make me think, oh, wow, that guy was smart to figure out how this got here from this, and then this and this. Well, that's great, but where'd that one come from? Still doesn't deal with the actual origin. Oops, left something out, right? It's instead of, see, that's the crazy thing is, what was Darwin's book? What was it called? Origins of Species. Wow. Anybody ever read that book? No? Okay. Figured you guys were into reading middle 1800s books, but well, the problem is all he's dealing with is species that are already here. He doesn't actually deal with the origin. All he does is say, oh, because this happened with this one from this one, then it must be that this one came from that one and this one. And so all he's doing is trying to make a logical argument for how something came to be. But the problem is you don't have the actual origin. So it's like taking a shop manual for a car to rebuild an engine to make one in the first place. Say, well, we got these parts and these parts. If we get our forge and we get a huge block of steel, or let's say we do an aluminum one, we'll do a Cadillac engine, get a huge block of aluminum, and then you can't design it without the design manual, right? You have to have the actual design manual. You can't have the repair manual. Repair manual will help you to understand a little bit about the design, but it's not going to show you how to design anything, right? And so again, the argument from congruity, we recognize that, things work the way that they do for a reason. And that reason is that's the way God made them. Letter H, this is the last one. I know we're over on time, but we're going to finish this up. Argument from history. Oliver Cromwell said, history is but the record of God trampling beneath his feet those who work in opposition to his purpose. That's an interesting statement. In the rise and fall of nations, we see the hand of God moving. Psalm chapter 75, verses 6 and 7 say, for promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another. Chapter 37, verses 10 and 13 of Psalms says, for yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. The Lord shall laugh at him, for he seeth that his day is coming. We can look at history. In fact, some have added an S to history and then separated the two S's there and makes it two words, his story, right? And so they say this is, when you look at history, in fact, it is almost impossible to ignore the existence of God when you look at history. Any point in history, when you look at the big picture, it's like, how in the world did that happen that way? God. So we can look at God's existence in just looking at history and seeing things. By the way, when you look at history, you see things all the time. It doesn't make sense. It just happened. Doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you insert the logical explanation, and that is that God's involved. Amen. Any questions or comments on this? We're going to close it up here pretty quick. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Creation things that science said we can do anything God can do. There's nothing we can't do that God has done. And so God actually answered the challenge and said, "That's fine. We'll go ahead. Whatever you want to do, we'll do it." So all right, we're going to go ahead and start. We can recreate the planet on a smaller scale, like as you did on the big scale. And so that's fine. Just get your own dirt.
Yeah, it is good. Right. Yeah.
We talked about God being all this. Just take a look at the rise and the fall of the four one world kingdoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God has added that indeed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and the one that's in the works right now. Yeah.
That includes us.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. So we'll pick up here on the existence of God developed by revelation. It's a short little section, and then maybe we will, if the Lord allows, maybe we will deal with the existence of God confirmed by reality and experience there. That will conclude, when we're done with that will conclude this lecture. So it'll only be, Lord willing, 3 weeks through the lecture, and then we'll start talking about the essence of God, who he is. Amen. All right, let's go ahead and pray.